Thank you, that was a cover.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Directors Club podcast. I'm your host, Jim Laskowski. And yes, it's been over a month, but we're going to make it up to you with one doozy of an episode featuring a returning guest that I'm just so excited to talk with again because they remain one of my favorite critics and writers. And, you know, anytime they have a Letterboxd review, I'm just like ready to hit that like button. They were on for a very memorable episode a couple of years ago that I was also excited to put out for director James Gray. And now they're back once again, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, great writer, interviewer, film critic, working out there for a little site called Letterboxd. It is an honor once again to have on the show the one and only Mitchell Beaupre.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be back.
Yay! So, you know, it's interesting. Your last name ends with an A pronunciation. You chose
True.
James Gray and now Jeremy Saulnier.
Look at that. What are we doing? Very curious.
From now on, you're going to be the go-to guest for any director that has an A syllable at the end of their name. But
yeah, we'll have to build out a list of people that make sense for that.
Because I'm all about consistency.
Michael Bay next.
Oh my God. Oh, would that be fun? That would be like very early on in this show's run. I did a De Palma episode where somebody hated De Palma and somebody loved De Palma, and they just kind of went at it. That would be perfect for
that's
Bay.
A smart way to do it. Yeah. I would probably fall a little more to the hate camp. I would have to say.
I am with you.
It's tough for me to rewatch a bunch of his or anything like that. But I know, I mean, he's got his lovers out there for sure.
I know there are people who love Bad Boys too, and I'm like, who? What? Huh?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, again, like it is interesting just hearing. I mean, I think November will be sort of a Michael Mann Redux episode, and it's just interesting to hear.
Tight.
Yeah, there's very interesting takes now on things like Miami Vice, right? So I'm curious about going through his filmography and just seeing like, how do I feel? How do I fall? Because it's more like runs hot and cold for me personally, as opposed to like he's consistently putting out masterpieces, you know?
Yeah. I kind of fall more in the line of like he's probably one of my like 5 favorite directors. And I've been rewatching a bunch of his stuff lately because Screen Drafts recently did that really great episode on him with Roxana Haddadi and Bilge Ebiri and Brandon Streisnig as the guests. And if you want anybody to speak about Michael Mann, it's, you know, those 3 people. So it kind of gave me the itch to start going through and just doing almost like an annual rewatch of like Michael Mann's movies. Cause I interviewed him last year for Ferrari. And so when I did that, I got the itch and just like rewatched like all of his movies. And now I'm doing it again still. And it's, maybe I'll just make it a yearly tradition. I don't know. It's pretty sweet to blaze through them.
Well, I certainly do that with Paul Thomas Anderson.
Right. Yeah.
I just feel like every year, I know his new movie isn't coming out till next year, but there's just always feels like I'll watch a video essay or something or hear a podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wow, you've really sparked something in me to make me want to see everything all over again. It's
I feel like that's what happened. Like with Mann, like on that episode, they talked about Last of the Mohicans like so beautifully, and I was just like, I want to watch Last of the Mohicans again tonight. And then I watched, Last of the Mohicans, and then after watching that, I was like, oh, let me just run through every single one of his movies. Like it's just such a specific thing. I feel like people like him and PTA kind of like capture that, where like they just have such a specific aura to the stuff that they do, and they also, both of them still have like a manageable enough filmography where it's like right around like 10 movies. You know, you're not doing that with like Scorsese where you're like watching all of his movies, because that kind of would take a month for you to do that like every year. But yeah, so it like makes it a manageable goal. You can knock them out in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's how the show can continue with manageable goals and and not like overwhelming filmographies. I mean, certainly, if somebody wants to come on and do Hitchcock again, I'm not going to be like, no.
Right.
You know, I'll make it work. Even if I just watch 7 or 8 of his movies and we just talk about those 7 or 8, that's fine. It's just I kind of realized you can't do
Complete
entire things unless you have a director like Jeremy Saulnier.
Perfect.
Which is perfect. Yeah. But before we begin that, there's just a couple of things up top here. I want to congratulate Andy Stedham, but I'm guessing Stedham, from Chicago on winning the gift card and movie book for a little contest I proposed 6 weeks ago to listeners. Just basically like, hey, if you feel like subscribing to my Substack and stuff, I'll just throw your name into a hat and maybe you'll win some cool stuff. And that's exactly what happened to Andy. So I'm really glad, and I'll be sending that out momentarily, probably this week. So thank you to Andy and congrats. Also, this time of year, it's going to get very interesting. Like I was talking to Mitchell before we started recording, when award contenders start trickling out and good stuff finally comes out. Like through the summer, I always have that existential crisis of, do I want to keep watching new movies? Maybe I should just stop.
Sure.
And then of course all the buzz starts coming out from all the festivals like TIFF and Fantastic Fest, and I start hearing all these new titles from various directors, and just really things I'm excited for start coming. So I'm going to definitely start recording, new movie review segments and attach them to the episodes, or at least post like little capsule reviews on Substack. So the critic circle that I am a part of doesn't think I'm slacking, but also I'm excited. There's
a lot coming out that I'm super stoked for. Do you have any a top 3 or whatever that you're especially excited to see?
Jeez. Yeah. I mean, it's tough because they're kind of just really random things off the top of my head that I know are playing the Chicago International Film Festival.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's I'm sure there's probably things way above what I'm thinking of right now, but there's a really weird Pavement documentary coming out by Alex Ross Perry.
Yeah.
That I'm just it's like a hybrid, it's part mockumentary, part documentary. I don't know what to make of it. I know Tim Heidecker and Jason Schwartzman are in it, and it just looks weird, and I don't know what to make of it. That it just kind of intrigues me, and it's that's a band that I grew slowly to love over time, and I know people in the indie rock circuit who are just oh yeah, this is it. I can't wait for this, So I've slowly become more excited about that, and I'm a Zemeckis apologist. I shouldn't say apologist, but I think recently, and I can't remember where it came up on a Screen Drafts episode, but it involved Billy Ray talking about Forrest Gump. Do you know which?
Oh, they did 1994. They did a big 1994 draft.
Ah, that's right. Thank you. Yes. And I remember going, well, I guess I understand why people hate it, but, and I get that with even some divisive Zemeckis work over the years, but I guess I'm just a little more excited for whatever this thing he's got coming. Mm-hmm. Even if it's just this failed experiment, which it very well could be.
Yeah, I'm super stoked for that. Honestly, the trailer, the first time I saw the trailer, I cried. I just, whatever he's doing with that, with here, and I feel that sort of time-lapse quality and everything, and sort of encompassing the micro of, one family's life within the macro of the totality of human existence. Something about that just really hits me in the heart. And so the first time that I saw that trailer, I just felt, even just the trailer, I just felt so overwhelmed by what is being captured there. I'm I agree with you. It could go pear-shaped very easily with Zemeckis, and he has I also haven't seen I haven't seen Welcome to Marwen. Maybe I'll watch it before this one comes out because I'm very excited for this one. But he can go one way or another, especially when he's kind of experimenting with technology and everything. He had quite a while there where he was lost in the uncanny valley with the Polar Expresses and the Beowulfs and what have you. But I'm really excited for here. That's definitely one that I'm really looking forward to, and I think I already kind of like have it like placeholded for myself as like one of those things where I'm probably going to really love it. Probably most of my coworkers are going to like either not even see it or just like totally hate it, and like I'm just kind of going to be like on my own little island where while they're talking about, you know, the things that they love, queer and whatever, which I'm excited for queer too, not to disparage that or anything, but like I just feel like, especially working at Letterboxd, like I just have like my coworkers are very like cool, you know, and like they gravitate towards like those ones that are, you know, much more obvious, like cinephile, like big hits, like, you know, the ones that are trending on Twitter that like everybody makes their profile pictures and whatever. Whereas like I'll look forward to seeing those. I'm excited to see Baby Girl like everybody else.
Oh yeah.
For me, it's I am more hyped for something like here, I think. I mean, it's, you know, it speaks to the point that like Horizon Chapter 1 is still like one of my top 3 movies of the year. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, you love Costner. So I mean, I do
love Costner. Yeah. And I love Westerns. So like it's, you know, I need Chapter 2. Come on, people. It's driving me crazy.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting to do a Costner episode down the road. That would be something I'd be down for.
Yeah, let's put a flag in that for me if that ever happens. I would love to do that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a possibility for maybe.
That's a quick run too. That's a quick run. It's only 4 movies so far, so.
I'd love to hear a passionate defense on The Postman, for example. So I'm sure that exists.
Not a bad movie. Not a bad movie.
Yeah, and of course, I mean, there's just a ton to get excited about, and I know, like I said, a lot of them are showing at the Chicago International Film Festival, but I mean, I get to see them until screeners start arriving. But yeah, I mean, like, there's a new Mike Leigh movie. There's that weird Joshua Oppenheimer musical thing.
Yeah.
That I'm hearing mostly mixed things about, but I just like, what is that? And I love Michael Shannon, so that's why I'm like, I'll see it regardless, but
right, yeah. It'll be interesting. That's his first like non-documentary, isn't it? Too, which I think is interesting. That's always kind of an interesting shift to see how that goes. Yeah, really, really divisive responses to that one. I have like some friends who gave it like a 4 on Letterboxd, and at least one who gave it like a 1. So I'll be curious to see that.
Yeah, I guess. Hey, that happens to certain movies, which includes
happened to Horizons.
I will catch up with that momentarily. That's one I've been putting off, and I'm like, I should have seen it in the theater to support him, but you know, I'm mostly like in the middle on his work, but I'm still excited to see it. We're talking about divisive movies. Oh boy, oh my. We're going to talk briefly about a movie that just came out by a director named Francis Ford Coppola, someone quite new to the scene. You know, he made a couple of splashes here and there, but he's back with a movie that nobody is talking about on social media at all, right?
Yeah.
Megalopolis. Mitchell, what the hell is Megalopolis? And did you like it?
Yeah, the second question's easier for me to answer. I did like it. First question, what is it? A little bit trickier to answer.
I know, right? That's why I threw it at you. Like, I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is like, it definitely is the kind of movie that you would imagine somebody the age of Francis Ford Coppola, who has been like talking about wanting to make this movie for decades and decades. Like it is the movie that I kind of expected it to be, honestly, especially like I feel like a lot of people watching it are people who have not gone down the path of like late era Francis Ford Coppola. Like these are people who like, you know, not a lot of people saw Youth Without Youth. Not a lot of people saw Twixt. And those are very kind of like lyrical, somewhat abstract kind of movies where he's putting a lot of ideas into the pot, and like maybe not all of it tastes fantastic when it comes out, but there are morsels in it that I think hit really hard. And the overall essence of it is something where you can really feel the passion that he's putting into it. And I think that if you hear Francis Ford Coppola speak, like, I don't know if there's, anybody out there making movies who speaks like as beautifully as he does about the kind of care that he puts into everything that he's doing. And
Definitely. Yeah.
I feel like that comes through in the movie. And so like there are images in Megalopolis that hit me so hard. And I think for me, like the core of it being this idea of kind of no matter how much control you want to have, the one thing you can't control is time. And, this has been an idea that's been germinating for him for so long, but watching it now so soon after his wife, Eleanor, passed away, and the movie at the end is dedicated to her, like, especially with the fact that Adam Driver, the main character, who is kind of this architect trying to build this like new utopian civilization, he is also grappling with his wife having passed away, and there's like a weird sort of like subplot of like a conspiracy aspect of that I was having a little bit of trouble parsing. But
Sure.
I think even just like the notion of somebody who is so obsessed with being able to stop time, but is like unable to stop this thing that has already happened, like it just, a lot of that really resonated for me. I found it really coming from the heart for Coppola. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Like, I am not surprised by the divisive reaction to Megalopolis at all. I can totally understand people just like not within the first like 10 minutes just being like, this does not work for me. It looks unusual. It's, he's constructed an entirely new world in it. I feel very effectively. I feel like within, the first, like maybe the first 5-10 minutes are a little bit jarring, but by like 30, I felt completely immersed in this world. I felt like, okay, I am in Megalopolis now, or New Rome City, as it's called in the movie. Like I'm fully immersed in this world, and I understand sort of like the vibes, the atmosphere of these people. I think for me, the thing that so I give it a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. The thing that maybe held me back from a 5 is that apart from there being a lot of different strands going on, and maybe like some of them I felt weren't as like fleshed out as others were, or, ones that didn't really coalesce with some of the larger themes that I was like pulling myself into as others did. I also I longed for a little bit more, I don't know if depth in character is the right way, but more like detail in character. I felt like a lot of the characters felt more like they were props towards these larger ideas. And like, I didn't really come out of it with a sense of who too many of these people were, other than perhaps Aubrey Plaza as WoW Platinum, this sort of like Hedda Hopper-esque mixed with like femme fatale, amalgamation of a few different ideas. But I think that she is like extraordinary in the movie. She completely like walks away with every scene that she shows up in. But yeah, maybe a little bit more definition and character is something that I would have wanted out of it. But overall, I came away really positive, and it certainly is unlike anything that anybody else is, making right now, which is exciting. Just seeing somebody like take a swing like that.
Oh, you pretty much just summed up exactly my feelings overall. How interesting would it have been if I came down and was like, "This movie's awful," and certainly I've heard people say that. And you mentioned, it was very funny when you said this one felt like it was from the heart.
Oh, yeah. No, not even intentionally, but yeah. Also, I mean, that's a movie that I love.
Yeah, I do too. And I think here's something I just like to just throw out there into film Twitter land and criticism in general. Why can't films be messy? Why can't films be imperfect? I mean, human beings are making these movies, and human beings are inherently imperfect. I don't know. It's just like, I mean, I get why some things don't work for certain people. It's not like I'm saying, oh, you're wrong for not liking this thing that's kind of a big swing or whatever. But I don't know. It's just funny to me. Like, even when I think about certain directors like Michael Mann and Ridley Scott and Coppola, who have a tendency to go back and re-edit their work and kind of look at it years down the road and say, oh, maybe I could have tweaked this, or maybe I could have fixed this little imperfection or sloppy choice or whatever. It's kind of, I don't know. Movies are meant to be just this one thing this complete story, this thing that, and it has to be A to B to C more or less, and it has to be understood right away. And I just don't think that's normally how it works. Like, my favorite movies, more or less, were not instant love right out of the gate. Like Mulholland Drive, Synecdoche, New York, very challenging fever dreams in a way that didn't entirely make sense for me on a first viewing, but they still entertained me. They still engaged me. It was just kind of like, I'm not sure what this all means. And then suddenly down the road, I'm like, oh. But I'm not saying that Megalopolis belongs in that category. It's just that, I don't know, this shouldn't be, I don't know, this shouldn't receive the kind of hatred it's gotten, even though I understand why it would.
Yeah. People just really have like a box that things like need to fit in. There is sort of like a centralization of like what movies are like allowed to be these days, and like sort of the cultural sphere, and it's very frustrating because anything that kind of operates outside of that. I mean, I feel like we saw it with Horizon too, which like is a movie that also similarly is like taking a really big swing, and for me is very like in a lot of ways like it's sort of like it has elements of revisionist Westernism, but like it also in a lot of ways is a really classical Western, which is like not a movie that not a kind of movie that's really being made anymore. And so I feel like people like came out of it being bored and like just dismissing it out of that. And it's like, what do you like I just don't even understand what the idea was that you were looking for. Like, I feel like a lot of people are going into Megalopolis like just to hate on it, and like I hate that as like a like, I don't ever want to be a person who like wag my finger like you made your mind up about the movie before you went into it. But like Megalopolis is like, it's what I expected it to be. It's what Francis Ford Coppola has been talking about that it's going to be. It's what I feel like the marketing is selling it as. So I don't know like what people are really expecting from it other than what it is. And I just feel like, to your point, like people just aren't as open to this idea of filmmakers who are taking swings, and that is very frustrating because I think it just really stifles the medium like overall, because how are we going to progress into like everything that exists that we love now is the result of somebody taking a swing at one point, And
exactly.
So if we're stopping people at that front gate, like we can't get to any sort of like forward momentum, and we're just rehashing doing fucking Ghostbusters, Frozen Empire, and whatever, like over and over and over again,
Yeah, and I know Brian Tallarico just recently tweeted too. I just don't understand the people who are like who want this to fail.
Yeah, me either.
That's like coming from such a negative energy that is. I mean, that's probably why it's more often than not I can't engage as much in film Twitterverse anymore, just because there's no room for nuance. Like, it does become very black and white, and people get on their soapboxes and just like, I don't know. And I'm not, that could be true of any social media. I shouldn't just say that about Twitter, but it's just, I get that feeling more there than anywhere else as of late.
There's a certain sort of like pile on culture to Twitter that I think doesn't exist as much in other social medias. And I agree. Like there are countless times where I'm in like group chats with friends or whatever, and I'm like, just like sharing a tweet that somebody else wrote, and I'm like, can you believe this shit? And it's just like, I just share it to like a small group of friends to vent and complain about it, because I'm like trying to show the strength to not publicly engage with it, because all of it, like, it doesn't go anywhere. It's just people who like want to hear themselves speak, and people who are like just echo chambering, their thoughts into oblivion. And it's like, what is the goal of any of this ultimately? It just feels like we're kind of shitting on art to shit on art, and that doesn't feel great. Yeah,
and I'm watching this, I definitely thought of like the Wachowskis and kind of their vision and their imagination and like how they see the world. And I know that sometimes like just that whole existential monologuing can be eye-rolling for certain people, and certainly Adam Driver does that quite a bit in the movie. But that stuff doesn't bother me. I mean, I like what's being said, first of all, but it's I think it's coming from a sincere place. And that's what really stands out for me in this movie. It's like, okay, certainly the ideas meander. There's inconsistent performances. There's certainly choices I didn't entirely get behind, but I don't know. I just I admire this level of ambition and how some of the actors here really do manage to bring something interesting, like you said with Aubrey Plaza. And there's I think there already is meme-like moments from Driver and Jon Voight.
Oh yeah, get back to the club is going to be a line that's going to reverberate through social media for quite a long time, I think. There's moments that just really pop, even if there are also moments that don't necessarily. There are definitely certain stretches where I found myself being like, wait, what exactly is going on? But then there's Adam Driver and Natalie Emmanuel, at the top of the world, essentially talking about how, connecting with others is the only thing that actually matters in the world. And in building this new utopia, the only institution that matters to him is marriage, which is not coming from a sense of puritanical, cult of marriage kind of thing, but out of this idea that love is the one thing that perseveres and that matters in this world. And I think that that's gorgeous,
But some people probably write it off as trite and something out of a Hallmark card. And I guess
to the point about Zemeckis, thinking of Zemeckis too, there is a thing where people are just so reticent these days to engage with earnestness. And I don't get that personally. I think we could use a little bit more earnestness and sincerity in our lives. We don't always have to be cynical all the time. I think that there is something really touching about people who are willing to go that route. It's a reason why I love Clint Eastwood as a director as well, because he really shoots from the heart.
Yeah, even if I don't agree with his politics or certain things that he says, again, it's still coming from a sincere place.
He is an interesting guy politically. He is
to say the
most
least.
Centrist, contradictory, political views that I've seen in a minute.
And I'm able to separate that as long as you're telling a good story that I'm engaged with, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing is I don't want. I mean, people will engage with this movie politically, and it's understandable. But I mean, part of me was expecting weirder swings, people kept mentioning Southland Tales, and I was just like, all right, let's see how weird this gets. And I wouldn't say it does. I mean, it at times for sure. I mean, I could honestly say a big strike really is. I just don't want to see Shia LaBeouf anymore. I don't need to. I mean, he's not terrible in this. It's just I don't know. I can't see him evolving into a quality actor like Ethan Hawke or something as time goes on. I just feel I don't think he needed to be in this movie, but that's just one minor thing. It's not like his role is huge, but
and I think he's it's an interesting thing where I feel he's effectively cast because that's a character that kind of every time that he shows up, your blood's supposed to boil. You're kind of supposed to hate this fucking rat piece of shit dude, and it's oh well, who you're gonna cast, a piece of shit fucking asshole. But it's also well, there are probably a lot of actors who could have who aren't assholes who could have played that role and given a performance that captures that same quality. I feel the same way as you. In general, I'm not a cancel culture-y kind of person, but I also am there's a difference between cancel culturing somebody and saying that their lives should be ruined forever and just being all right, well, this person, has given enough evidence that they're probably a pretty bad person, and I don't really want to see them in movies anymore, And I feel that's kind of where I land with somebody like him, where I'm well, I mean, I'd rather not. I'd rather you not be in it if you didn't have to be.
Right. I almost feel after Honey Boy, he could have just stopped. I mean,
that whole thing was so interesting. Where then, a year later, he comes out and is oh yeah, that all that whole thing about that being a biopic about my dad abusing me or whatever. That's actually a lie. That was never what are we doing here, guy?
Yeah, no kidding. That's just ugh. Yeah. That kind of stuff rubs me the wrong way to make me not want to support anything he does, of course. But but he's here. I mean, that's Coppola's choice to sort of look past all that. And I guess on one hand, I'm like, all right, good on him for just saying, I want this actor to play this part, and he's probably going to do it well. And, at the same time, it's Aubrey Plaza, geez. I mean, she does, I mean, like, I guess consistently does this kind of role, but still brings something interesting and different this time around. I mean, you mentioned that sort of hybrid kind of femme fatale performance here, and it's just, she's so compelling in so many ways, and certainly here, I'm just like, damn, she kind of runs away with the movie for the most part. So,
100%.
It's a very good movie. I'd be curious to watch it down the road again, knowing what I know and sort of separating myself from all the conversations taking place. So but I hope people do support it, because it's a big swing, and I'm here for most big swings in general.
And just something made outside of the studio system these days, getting like a wide release is something that is becoming more and more rare.
Definitely. So, on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, Jeremy Saulnier. And just in terms of like, I don't think we'll ever see a Megalopolis from Jeremy Saulnier. I mean, who knows down the road?
But I mean, he is somebody who, at least in his first two movies, did operate outside of the studio system and, had to self-fund his stuff. So
when you were making these movies with your friends and playing in bands, that you also met your, sort of frequent collaborator, Macon Blair, as well, right? So he was showing up in these movies as well, I'm guessing?
Oh yeah, he was always a part of my cinematic upbringing. I mean, we made our first movie together, like I think I was in 6th grade. I think it was 87 or 88. That first film that Macon and I and a bunch of our friends did was called Mega Cop.
Oh man, suck mine. Oh.
Very much inspired by, well, a little bit of Verhoeven, but
RoboCop.
A lot of Michael Mann, like Miami Vice. It was like cartel action. So cut to 4 years later, and I was walking down the street, and Macon drives by in his 1976 Pontiac Ventura, and they were actually going to film the sequel to Mega Cop.
Oh, really?
They were still doing Mega Cop shit, which was tempera paint in Ziploc bags for blood, and you just smash it on your chest. I was able to just that day bring a bunch of ladyfingers and condoms, sort of more of the Dick Smith style, like blood, and we go up. And I introduced this advanced squib technology to them, and I was instantly sort of initiated into the gang.
Man, when I first saw Blue Ruin, it was just like, I probably wrote down when the closing credits started, the director of the film, and underlined it and been like, all right, following this guy.
Yeah.
And because like, even as I'm watching, I was like, okay, this is probably not quite on the same level as something like Blood Simple, but it gets pretty close, and that's just totally my vibe. It's not as stylized as the Coens, but I just love a simple revenge story where things go wrong, and how it escalates and creates more tension and more chaos. And we'll get to that soon, but I oddly enough, you mentioned Roxana Haddadi, and I found this quote from RogerEbert.com who said this about Saulnier, and I was just like, oof, it's so good. And I just want to start with this. Roxana Haddadi wrote, quote, "He has painted a multifaceted triptych of America's working poor that is defined by an ever-present clash between modernism and tribalism, and by the increasingly desperate methods required to survive in an often unyielding world." Unquote. I'm just like, damn, so good. I know some people just really write amazingly, and you're one of them, of course.
Thank you.
That it just makes me like, oh. I just sigh and just kind of go, damn, that's perfect. That's just exactly what I wanted. Like, we don't have to go into a long sort of detour, but yeah, when you wrote that review of Longlegs, I just started, this is me. I was like, yes.
Thank you.
So yeah, that was just something like, that she wrote that kind of just like, kind of hit harder, because on one hand, my initial thoughts were, Saulnier is just a really good action thriller suspense director. What else is there? And then I read that, and I'm like, okay, there's definitely more than just like, oh, cool, you can craft a good sequence, and that's that. Let's move on. There's more to unpack. And in fact, you'll get to hear a quick interview at the end of this episode that I did with Saulnier way back for Green Room when I was doing this little sort of offshoot called Pop Culture Club, and he couldn't have been cooler to talk with. He's awesome. And I also want to link in the show notes this Letterboxd like Q&A thing from 2016. Yeah. It's insanely long, but
yeah, crazy that he did that. Yeah, it's like so this was before my time at Letterboxd, but they had they invited Letterboxd members to submit questions to him. Kind of, I mean, it was October, so it must have been maybe around the time of the Blu-ray release of Green Room, and over 400 questions were submitted, and he answered if you look through he answered at least 50 of them. It's great, and with rich detail and everything too. Talking about Green Room, about Blue Ruin, a little bit about Murder Party, and then just kind of about vibes in general. There's a whole section of people asking him very technical questions about what cameras he uses and what editing equipment he prefers and stuff like that. It's really, really detailed. I was going through it again. I've read it a few times now, and I was going through it again the other day while just kind of preparing some notes and everything for doing this. And he is he's such a great speaker. He's such a great conversationalist. He's so you can tell that he kind of just gets off on all of this stuff. He really loves the details. And sure. He really he's doing the shit that he loves. And he's not none of his movies are things where he just sold out to make a buck or whatever. And no hate to anybody who does that. People have to make money to do the things that they want to do. But his everything that he puts out there, it seems he is fully behind and grinding hardcore for. And yeah, he just seems like a really cool dude. Anytime that I've read or watched an interview with him, speaking of Roxana and Blake Howard at the One Heat Minute podcast recently did a sort of retrospective conversation with Jeremy Saulnier and Macon Blair about Green Room specifically. And that's a really fantastic podcast episode that people should listen to. I mean, I think Roxana is sort of the world's foremost expert on Jeremy Saulnier. I think everything that she just did another interview with him for Vulture about Rebel Ridge, which is fantastic. So if you just Google Roxana Haddadi plus Jeremy Saulnier, you'll probably get 10 things come up, and they're all extremely worth reading.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And that's it's so great to see. And you're talking about, you can listen to a commentary, or you can listen to an interview or read an interview with him, and you do get that sense that he's totally all in on this stuff and just excited to talk about it. He's probably one of those people, like a Tarantino, maybe not as hypermanic, thankfully, but just it really into movies, really into his fans, really into the process, and that kind of in turn. That kind of energy feeds into you, and you get excited about what he brings to the table. So
yeah, because when he did that Q&A for Letterboxd too, he gave us 5 different lists as well. He gave him a list of films that inspired Green Room. He gave him a list of films that inspired Blue Ruin, which had Blood Simple on it, which you were just mentioning in reference to Blue Ruin. He gave a list of his favorite movies of all time. He gave a list, and he gave a list of his biggest blind spots, the movies that at that time in October 2016 that he was most ashamed that he had never seen before, which had Casablanca on it and Breathless and 5 Easy Pieces was on there. It was 10 total. Those are the ones that I can remember off the top of my head. But so it's just this dude who is he's putting out movies. He's a very busy man, but he also just takes this time to talk about in such detail the movies that he's making, but also other movies too. And he's clearly very inspired and influenced by movies, but at the same time wants to kind of bring his own spin on things. In that Rebel Ridge interview that he did with Roxana, he talks about how it's how Rebel Ridge for him is First Blood meets Michael Clayton, which I think is a really cool combination of things, and just a cool way to think about something. I know I can't remember if it's Green Room or Blue, like Green Room or Blue Ruin. One of them, he said his like main influence was Straw Dogs, which I feel like feels more Blue Ruin probably. But like he kind of like had that as sort of like a template, as like a sort of North Star. And other than that, he didn't watch any other like movies like leading into it, like storyboarding or like developing or anything like that. He checked out Straw Dogs a couple times while going through it, but he didn't want to be too influenced by other things. He just kind of like lets the subconscious influences like feed into everything.
Yeah, and I definitely get that sense too, and it's just so cool to hear. But I mean, his debut film came a little bit before what I guess most would consider to be his breakout with Blue Ruin. Mm-hmm. And it's aptly titled Murder Party from 2007. And it's just about a dude who picks up an invitation to a Halloween costume murder party while walking down the street. And, you know, it's interesting to go back to this, knowing what we know and seeing all of his other work. Because, like, on one hand, I kind of said, yeah, this is a good setup. It's very, you know, again, we both love After Hours. It probably comes up like 9 times when we talk. But like, just like the idea of being trapped in a certain situation and trying to figure out how am I going to get out of this situation is just kind of my ideal starting point for a movie, you know. But here it's like, instead of being trapped in a giant in New York, essentially, he's trapped in this abandoned warehouse set up by these deranged art students who really just want to like, just set up this trap in order to commit murder as a work of art to impress somebody to hopefully get money or a large arts fund or grant or something like that. But I don't know. It's a fun premise, and certainly has shocking kills and dark humor and things that you would come to see later on done more effectively. But it does feel like a debut that was kind of just made, not as, I wouldn't say as a lark, because he did put a lot into it, you know, and it was made with his friends, but it doesn't feel like a artistic statement, quote unquote, really. It's just kind of a fun genre exercise, really. It's, you know, he worked with hardly any budget and took on pretty much so many roles, like writer, director, cinematographer. Yeah. But you know, I wouldn't say this was like a passion project, but it's kind of like a good blueprint, you know, like it's not in the same class as his later work, but it's still fun to watch. There's a couple of things where I'd kind of go, like, I'm not a fan of like the whole rotating camera work post Reservoir Dogs that happens at one point with that like confessional sequence where they're all like in a circle. I just don't like that stuff. And yeah, like it is a little too talky at times, but you know, there's certainly things to really appreciate about it. I mean, this starts a relationship. Actually, I think it started way before Murder Party with Macon Blair being here. Like, they've been friends for, I think, even since high school. But yeah, I mean, gosh, I hope Macon Blair gets to make more films, by the way. I'd be excited to see that.
Yeah, let's get the Toxic Avenger out here into the world. What's up with that?
I know. Whatever happened to that? That played at like South by Southwest or something and then never got distribution.
Yeah, I think it was at like Fantasia maybe last year, one of the genre festivals, and it's just been like stuck. Like, it seems like the rumors and word around the industry or whatever that have been reported on is that it's just like so weird that they're like struggling to find like somebody to pick it up and distribute it, which to me like seems like crazy. Like, it's like the amount of stuff that like gets put out, like you would think that like a Shudder or something would just like kind of easily like pick that up and put it out, unless they're really holding out for like a bigger distribution plan and like are not able to pick it up. I don't know. Like, I just can't imagine that it's so weird. Like, Skinamarink came out. Like, that's like such an abstract kind of movie, you know, and it got like enough buzz to get a release in it. Toxic Avenger seemed like it got pretty good reviews out of Fantasia. And so it's odd that it hasn't been released, but I would love to see him make and be able to direct more and get some stuff out there, because they have such like a great sensibility. What's the name of the one that he did that the one the Grand Jury Prize at Sundance? Is it I don't feel at home in this world anymore.
That's it. You got it.
with Melanie Linsky and Elijah Wood, which like that, it feels so much in like the Saulnier kind of brand. And
Definitely.
so like it definitely like makes sense that these two guys have this like sensibility that works together. And Saulnier even like talks about how he still like every single one of his scripts, the first people that read it are his wife and producer Sky and Macon Blair. And like he gets like notes from them on everything, even when they're not like actively working together.
That's sweet.
Which is really cool. Yeah. And yeah, Murder Party, I'm with you. Like I wanted to see kind of what Saulnier like even says about this one, because I know for a while he didn't really like talk about it that much. Like you said, it was made like so many years before Blue Ruin. They like put like all of their money into it. They basically like went bankrupt, like putting money into like making this just to get something made. That was basically like the idea. They just wanted to make something. Him and his group, his high school friends, and like all these people who acted in the movie, Macon, everybody. But like once it was made, they made it like very much in the spirit of like Peter Jackson's kind of early movies. Was something that he talked about being like an influence, was like Bad Taste.
Totally.
And that's like what they wanted to make. You know, they wanted to make like a sleazy horror comedy. And I think it's effective as that. But he says that after that, like he was just getting offers to do more of that. And he didn't want to your point, like he didn't want to have this be the trajectory of his career. He didn't like him and Macon didn't want this to be like their calling card. And so he like pivoted back to doing like advertising and like shooting other people's movies and whatever. And so it was a long time before they were able to kind of drum up the funding for Blue Ruin, which again, they put like most of their own money into, and they kickstarted to get like money for Blue Ruin. But yeah, I think Murder Party, it's fun. I certainly think it's, you know, the lesser of his 5 movies. I would imagine that he would probably, you know, say the same thing. But you do see sort of like some of those early building blocks of things that would come about in his later work. Like you were saying about sort of like people in confined environments stacked up against, you know, other people trying to murder them. And like this idea of like kind of outsiders drifting into like tight-knit like oddball communities. And a lot of the violence in it, even though it's, you know, called Murder Party, it's literally about a murder party of them trying to kill this dude. A lot of the violence is like very accidental. Like the first kill that happens, or the first death that happens, is, you know, one of these people at the murder party is dressed as a cheerleader. That's her Halloween costume. And she just starts talking about how like she hasn't eaten anything all day. She needs something to eat. And then she drops to the ground and smashes her head on something, and it splits her head open and she's dead, you know? And it's like these little moments, which is something that happens a lot in his movies, of like these accidental things happen that create horrific violence. And then a lot of the kind of plot is like people responding to like jarring, unexpected moments like that. And
yeah,
so
the randomness of it.
Yeah, exactly. So you get a little bit of that in Murder Party too, that I think, you know, pierces through to his other work as well. So it's nice. It's a nice watch to kind of get like, as I almost liked watching it more. This was actually the first time that I had seen it, was watching it in preparation for this. It was the only one of his movies that I hadn't seen before. And so it was kind of nice to watch it now, having seen all of his other movies, and kind of see it, like picking up those pieces versus like, I don't know if I would have appreciated it as much even if I had watched it when it came out and kind of judged it like on its own merits, versus seeing it as this sort of initial, you know, first feature out of the gate for somebody who would take some of these pieces and go on to become somebody that I think is one of, you know, our best working filmmakers.
I completely agree. And I think I did go back and watch it after I saw Blue Ruin, just because I was curious, like, well, what else has this guy done? And I remember, having kind of like more of an, like I shrugged it off kind of a feeling after it was over. Like I didn't dislike it, but I think seeing Blue Ruin set up certain expectations in a way.
Yeah, you can almost draw like a parallel to it between like from that to like what The Sixth Sense is for like Shyamalan, and how like that's not his first movie, but like it in so many ways feels like his first movie, because that's the one that kind of represents who he is as a filmmaker from like then on, and what he's doing, and like his aesthetic, his style, and like his proficiencies. But you can still watch kind of those earlier ones that Shyamalan did and pick up pieces of what like the themes and the ideas and what his interests are that he would be like filtering through the later stuff.
Yeah, it was interesting too, because you mentioned that in between Murder Party and Blue Ruin, he sort of shot commercials and found work freelance here and there, and became a cinematographer for a lot of indie films. And it was very interesting for me. Earlier this year, I was just going back and watching a film called I Used to Be Darker from 2013 with Dara Campbell and Hannah Gross. And it was just funny. Like, I'm watching this movie and the credits come up and it says, director of photography, Jeremy Saulnier. And I was like, whoa. And I messaged you and I was like, that's weird. I had no idea.
Yeah.
But it was just cool to see that. Like, and that was another movie that was sort of kickstarted. And actually it's really good. Like, I think Dara Campbell has sort of become one of my new favorites ever. After seeing Anne at 13,000 feet, like kind of going backwards and seeing mostly just, the kind of indie films she's done out of like Canada are just really, really special to me. Like I've been comparing her to like what Sarah Polley was early on as an actor. And it's that one's really good and well worth seeing too, even though it's obviously far from the kind of movies that Jeremy Saulnier makes. That one in particular is a very good sort of coming of age story, teen awkwardness and stuff like that. But that was just cool to discover. But we can just move on, because I think we're really excited to talk about Blue Ruin. Anytime I go back to this, I think I've seen it 3 or 4 times now, and it's just like, man, is this rewatchable? And it makes complete sense. Like you talked about, Murder Party not being the calling card that neither Macon Blair or Jeremy Saulnier wanted to necessarily say, hey, this is the kind of stuff we're interested in making. No, Blue Ruin is that for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think they were committed to this one kind of being what the calling card would be for them. Like, this is the kind of shit, this is what we're about,
Yeah, and this is just a remarkable thriller that's just very tight and taut. And every time I go back to it, I just kind of go, it's there's no surprise here why I became an immediate fan, because when you have like a simple sort of succinct, almost, I wouldn't even say like thrill ride, but it's just, there's sustained suspense and tension. I think of films like Breakdown, where it's just
shit. Yeah, sure.
You know exactly what's going to happen. It starts, and like there's hardly any setup. It's just like, this is the story. You're in it right away. There's not a lot of plot.
You're kind of picking up the pieces through it, which I really like in his movies too. He he employs this idea of like not relying on exposition. You kind of just like, you're put into scenarios. I'll think of how to phrase this. Like he kind of like withholds information from the audience and the characters in a way that's really exciting, because the tension is like kind of ratcheted up because you don't have all of the pieces of the scenario that you're even in. So you're kind of putting that together like as you're experiencing the moment. And I think that's something that's really exciting and kind of dries up that suspense. He's definitely like one of our greatest directors at like escalating tension. And I think that's a really useful tool in doing that.
Yeah, and again, show, don't tell really is effective here, just like at the start where you're just like, okay, clearly he's taking a bath, but that place that where he is isn't his. You sort of just figure it out through context and clues and his reactions to, well, he's going to jump out of the window, so clearly you wouldn't do that at your own place. But it's just, I love that. I love that, like, he's just showing you what's happening.
Yeah, and he gets to like his car that he's living out of, and there's bullet holes in it, and you don't know where these bullet holes came from and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just a simple story. A man wants to track down the murderer of his parents after the supposed murderer was released from prison. And, of course, a whole bunch of complications ensue once he actually does, hopefully, or tries to confront the person that did it. But then, yeah, of course, It's anything but simple, anything but blood simple, I should say.
Sure.
But no, lots of like noir films start out with like just a simple premise and just knows how to like build and escalate tension on top of it to keep your interest and keep you on edge. And this is kind of just a really nice, streamlined example of what makes him such an incredible director, like working with that limited budget crew and cast. I think this was kickstarted too, if I'm not mistaken.
This one was kickstarted. Partly they put up all of their own money, and then they still needed like a few $100,000 to like fulfill sort of like paying the cast and crew, you know, their kind of like the wages that they needed and everything. So they kickstarted a little bit there at the end.
Yeah. And you just sort of just watch this lead character played by Macon Blair just work through this kind of almost like rat maze that he set up himself by doing what he does. And yet you understand him. You know, you understand his motivations, his desire. I mean, most people probably wouldn't go to the lengths that he does, but you relate to it to a degree, because you're just like, you're you know, it's again an exercise in empathy, but it's also his movies are very grounded at the same time, even if like these are extreme circumstances and he does extreme things, but they're also like really practical, like just him trying to get that arrow out of his leg, right? Yeah. Like, I mean, you could sort of point again to the Coen brothers and something like No Country for Old Men. You get that sequence of Anton Chigurh trying to heal his wound, and you sort of go through the minutia of all that. But like, yeah, I mean, having somebody like a more internalized character too. You know, Macon Blair isn't playing Rambo.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and I think that's exactly what makes it more grounded and relatable and engaging throughout. Just because, like, yeah, you don't always get a sense of he knows what he's doing either, especially with a gun.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's something that really gravitated me towards this when I first saw it, is this idea of like, this isn't a guy who's like Bruce Willis or Mark Wahlberg, like playing like a guy who's like an insurance adjuster by day, who's like just been happening to have spent the last decade training every night on the off chance that he gets into a blood war with a family of nasty criminals. You know, like it's a dude who's just like a normal guy who's really inept at like doing revenge thriller kind of shit, as 99% of us would be if we tried to, you know, do what this guy's doing in this movie. And like that scene is a perfect example that you mentioned with him trying to get this arrow. It's actually, you know, the Anton Chigurh scene in No Country is exactly what I always think of when I see that, because that's a movie where like it's cool to see Anton Chigurh like go through the steps of dressing his wound and kind of, you know, patching himself up, because he's like so ruthless, he's so efficient, he knows exactly what he's doing. And so Dwight, Macon Blair's character, is a guy who wants to be that because he has put himself in this scenario. And instead, what happens is what would happen to most of us. He fucks up. He bleeds everywhere. He passes out. He goes to the ER and he has to get patched up by a doctor. And it's like, there's, you know, like there's this really dry humor to it. But there also is that kind of like pathos that you were talking about, where it's like, this is a guy who is, you know, he wants to find some sort of like restorative justice in this world. He wants to make something right. And so he tries to enact that. And in trying to do that, he has now put himself on a path where he has to like face the consequences of his actions. And in almost every scene, he's not trying to like be the cool badass. He's almost trying to like get everything to stop, because now he's just scared and now he's just trying to survive and get through it. And
yeah, and he didn't want to involve his sister and her family.
Yeah. He keeps being faced with these consequences because he didn't think through what he was doing. He doesn't think this shit through at all. And I think that's a really unique approach to it, where it is like just a civilian person. He's been living out of his car. quick shout out, the like opening section of this movie shot in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, which I live in Delaware.
Wow.
So like that's a pretty cool and exciting.
That's not something you hear every day either.
Yeah, exactly. So like it's when I saw it and I knew that, and like I distinctly like there's a couple like landmarks that are like so clearly Rehoboth Beach in that, because I've been to that beach like a lot, and so I always thought that was really cool. But like so it's like there's almost something a little bit like movie cool about like, oh, this dude doesn't even have a home. He's just drifting, and he's like, now he's going to be a badass and like, pull this guy aside in a like, shitty bathroom and murder him, But then like when the sister gets involved, it's like, or when he, meets up with the sister and realizes that now this family is going after his sister. Like his sister's just a mom living in the suburbs. And like, now he has brought this shit home to her. And that opens up a whole new thing for him. And like a whole new realization of like, you are not just yourself, and the actions that you take are not going to be contained within this bubble. It's going to reverberate outside of yourself. And I think that the movie really deploys that kind of like unraveling really impressively. Like it feels really organic.
Organic is a perfect way to put it. Yeah. And that's, it's funny too. Like I think even in my like when this first came out and I wrote a review, I for some reason, I guess I'm still longing for the old David Gordon Green. Like the George Washington, all the Real Girls, and especially Undertow. Like I was just thinking, like how
that's a good movie.
I want those movies. Like I want him to make those kind of movies again. I don't think we'll get them, but it was just like, I want something like that. And here we have sort of just like an inkling of it mixed with something like the Coen Brothers. But it's just it really does show how impulsive actions do have those consequences, and how you have to sort of deal with them as you go along. Like, and as somebody with ADHD, I totally would have forgotten my keys. Like after he kills that guy.
Oh my God. I love, that's such a great detail too. And like the fact that he like, so he kills him with a knife, right? And he goes and he like wants to do the cool badass thing and pierce the tire of the family's car with the knife, and he jams it in. But he doesn't think that, like, as he's jamming it in, he's going to, like, his grip is going to slide on it because his hand's covered in blood. And he cuts open his own hand, like, fully open on the knife. And so it's, like, those little details that are, like, the little details, like, capturing his ineptitude and how he doesn't, like, think through this plan, because it all is kind of impulsive and driven by emotion and driven by this guy who is not cut out for this shit. It just, like... it adds these complications to where like it's not going to be this clean cut, ruthless kind of like efficient thing of the calculated killer is going to get the job done. It's like, no, this dude is just sort of like lost in a drift. And I love one of the other details that I love with it is like, when we're first introduced to him, as he's living out of his car, he has this long hair, this like really long shaggy beard, which again looks like a kind of character that could be sort of like a badass, like, killer in a movie. And then after like he gets that first kill and everything done, and he goes to see his sister, he shaves the beard, he cuts his hair, and it's like, oh, he just looks like a boring dude who like works in an office. Like this is not a guy who was cut out for this at all. Yeah, no, definitely. And you get that, again, grounded reality of like, oh yeah, that guy's just a regular guy. He's just a guy. And credit to like Macon Blair's performance with that too, because he has he wears the like tragedy of this character so well, like in his eyes and his face. Like it's just sort of like sullen and worn, and he has this sort of like lost puppy dog kind of quality to like how his facial expressions are, that I think really like, even though this guy is like fucking up and you're like, guy, like please stop, like this guy is such a mess, like you are endeared to him too. Yes. Still the whole time you're still rooting for him, even though he's like constantly messing up, and like he's the sideshow Bob thing of stepping on the rake over and over and over again. Yeah, and really, I remember when I first saw this movie and he meets up with his friend Ben, I'm like,
who is that? I've seen that face before.
Mm-hmm.
Where have I seen this guy? And lo and behold, it's Buzz from Home Alone.
Yeah.
Wow. But we don't necessarily need to go into the actor himself, because if you go on Wikipedia, another asshole.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame.
It is. But still,
it is really cool casting.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Like, just kind of unexpected. It's like, oh, that's cool. Along with Eve Plum as... I don't know, she doesn't have like a substantial part in this. Like,
She
I
just
think
kind of pops up, yeah.
Yeah. It's just kind of, again, unexpected and interesting. Like, he does that throughout all of his films, I'd say. Just like throw in somebody to go, oh wow, that person's in this. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this is just a fantastic movie, and it really, like, for me, it is pretty close neck and neck with the two movies that have a color in the title.
Yeah.
There's a brand new spanking 4K Blu-ray thing that's out with a lot of extras. I'll probably watch it.
That's the most old man you've ever sounded. A brand new spanking 4K Blu-ray thing.
I know. I sound like William Friedkin. He would always say, it's coming out on Blu-ray.
I hope you appreciate the situation. Things have gone south. No doubt. Now, whatever you saw or did is no longer my concern. But let's be clear. It won't end well.
Why don't you take the lead on Green Room? Because I know you 5 stars all the way, masterpiece. Yeah.
Green Room is it's one of my favorite movies of all time.
Rock on.
It is. So it came out in 2016. I think it got some festival play in 2015. But it got its sort of like domestic release in 2016. And it pretty like Blue Ruin, pretty simple setup. It's a punk rock band played by Anton Yelchin, Aaliyah Shawkat, Joe Cole, and Callum Turner. Are kind of, similar to Blue Ruin, sort of like adrift, just like living out of their van, going on kind of this like wayward tour, just picking up like stray gigs where they can to keep themselves fed. And they are desperate. When we first meet them, they're falling asleep behind the wheel of the car, crashing into a field. They're having to siphon gas from families at like a hockey rink to get gas just to get to the next city. And they pick up a gig at a bar that is a neo-Nazi skinhead bar. And while there, they discover through, complete accident, they see a murder happen in the green room. And the crux of the movie really is just them contained in this green room, trapped with one of the Nazis, with a dead body, and with a like sort of quasi Nazi played by Imogen Poots, who is the best friend of this woman who has been murdered. And outside the door is Patrick Stewart as the gnarliest, most like clinical, like efficient sort of like neo-Nazi. He's the leader of this crew, and these people are trying to find a way to get in to kill these guys. That's sort of the setup, and what Saulnier does with it is so layered and like so exciting, and he like packs in all of these different details. Just the way that he goes about all of it is like completely different than what you would expect. The way that even like Patrick Stewart's character is trying to get in this room, he's not smashing the door down. He's basically trying to talk them into opening the door, knowing that if they open that door, they're going to kill them, but they're going to kill them in a way that protects this Nazi group. They're going to kill them in a way where it looks like it was justified killing, or these ruthless like dogs, these like, fight dogs killed them, and because they were trying to steal gas and whatever. And so it's like it's one of these movies that is just all about the details. And I remember I was excited to see it when it came out because I had seen Blue Ruin, really liked Blue Ruin, was a really big fan of Anton Yelchin, the late great Anton Yelchin, who this was his last movie before he suddenly, very shockingly passed away. And I saw it opening night, and I really I was immediately just blown away by it. It is nerve shredding. The level of anxiety that he builds up in this, despite so much of it only kind of taking place within this one room with these guys on the other side. You just get so invested in the characters. There's such a human touch on these characters, this group of 4, these bandmates, and you really feel them together. I around the time that I saw this, through my 20s, I was never in a band. I don't have any sort of musical gifts myself, but I was in sort of a friend group where in our friend group was a band, and they kind of did a similar thing. They were kind of working their day jobs and touring, picking up bar gigs, whatever. And so I was seeing within this group in Green Room what I saw in my friends of just sort of the bullshit conversations that you get into, the nonsense, and then you play a gig, and when you're playing a gig, you don't know where it's going to be every time. You're just trying to play a gig, and sometimes the crowd isn't great. Sometimes they're not the nicest people in the world. Sometimes you don't agree with their politics, whatever, but you're just trying to play a gig, and you get into some thorny situations there a lot, a good amount of the time. And so I just I felt there was so much texture and richness in the details of this, and capturing the spirit of who these characters are and the life that they're living even before. And a lot of that is coming from Saulnier was in a punk band when he was younger. A lot of his friends are still in punk bands, so this is all coming from a very real, authentic place for him. And that's all just kind of setting the stage in a very grounded, real place before we get into the we're going to fuck these guys up kind of aspect of it. And that's where that tension ratchets up. That's where his fantastic work with his crew of makeup and prosthetic team comes into place with some of the violence in this is some of the gnarliest shit that I've ever seen. And it sticks with you. And a lot of times it's really abrupt. He does this really great sort of pacing with his violence in all of his movies, but especially this one where it's he lets sort of everything settle and simmer, and the tension is building and building. And then very abruptly, there's a burst of violence. It is so unflinchingly real and devastating and horrific. And then just as quickly, it's over, and you're sitting in sort of the aftermath of that and trying to process what just happened and trying to process what do we do next as you're screaming and there's blood and mangled limbs and maybe another dead body, and then it kind of builds and builds again, and then another burst of violence happens, and it kind of just keeps edging you and keeping you on the edge of your seat. And I think that he's so good at kind of maintaining that tension, which Green Room does the entire way throughout. I saw it twice. It only played for a week. It played at my theater in Dover, Delaware, which was nice. The fact that this even got a wide release. So I saw it twice in theaters in that week, and then when it came out on Blu-ray, I literally just had the Blu-ray in my car, and for 2 months I showed it to at least 7 different friends. I would just bring it to my friends' houses and show it to them, and we would have get-togethers, and people, I would show people this movie, and everyone loved it. Everyone was fucked up by it. Everyone was very engaged with it. It's one of those movies where you, especially seeing it in a theater, you hear people reacting to it, the whole way through. You hear people reacting to these moments, and just as much you can hear the quiet when there isn't something really dramatic happening, because everybody is so tense waiting for the next thing that's going to happen. It's such an exciting movie.
I want to attend one of your Green Room themed parties.
Yeah, it still is the kind of thing too where even after that whole run of me showing it to people, anytime I would start dating somebody new, I would like within the first like month of us dating, I would be like, have you seen Green Room? And they're like, no. And I'm like, we're watching Green Room tonight. Like it is one of those kind of movies, which for me is like After Hours too. It's like one of those like litmus test kind of movies where I'm like, I have to show like anytime I make a new, like a friend, a romantic acquaintance, like whatever, like it's like one of those movies that I'm like, this is who I am. This is what I'm about, you know? So like, if
this is my jam, this is an extension of what I'm into. And like, yeah,
if you don't vibe with this, maybe, I don't know, you know, maybe this isn't going to work out.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's wild to go back to this movie. I mean, I guess if, you know, we were one of those podcasts that like every movie we talk about, you pair it with another movie. And we kind of did that with Blue Ruin more or less with like a Coen Brothers, either No Country or Blood Simple. This to me was like his assault on Precinct 13.
Yeah, 100%. It's like that. And it's also like, it's almost like Rio Bravo in a way too.
Oh
like,
yeah.
It has like such a Western vibe to it, which I'll bring up Westerns again when we talk about Rebel Ridge. But like those two out of his have such like a neo-Western sort of element to it, which Assault on Precinct 13 is very much like feels like a Western as well. Like
Carpenter kind of just like admitted like he stole Rio Bravo almost every movie practically. But yeah, it's just like, no, I'm pretty much in awe of this from beginning to end. You know, I think maybe it's like just the only thing that keeps it from masterpiece status for me is I guess I just want more out of the final confrontation than we get. And I'm not saying like it's bad. It's just like something, I'm not saying like it has to be like a big giant shootout or I don't know what I want, but maybe the final confrontation with Patrick Stewart. I don't think it's anticlimactic is not the right way to describe it, but there's just something missing for me personally that keeps it from like, ooh, yeah, like that kind of like final hurrah, final blow, final like finale kind of a approach. But like, I know he doesn't really do that even with his movies.
It almost feels like it's almost like deliberately anticlimactic with when they kind of have that confrontation. Cause it's like, I think Imogen Poots even says like, just shoot this fucking guy, you know? And it's like, they're just they've been run through so much. They're so exhausted. And it kind of is like there's a scene that there's a line that Devin Rattray's character has in Blue Ruin where he like tells Macon Blair's character in that movie that like the thing that's going to fuck him up is talking too much, like trying to explain too much, like trying to do the movie speech. And ultimately that is kind of what fucks him up in Blue Ruin is he tries to do the speech to kind of like talk about why this is happening to these people and whatever, why he's doing this. And in Green Room, kind of towards the end there, it's like, you know, and they spend this whole movie having Patrick Stewart kind of like talk them out of shit, which I love so much. This sort of like social niceties of like trusting, like, oh yeah, he's totally gonna get the cops and call them to come back, and then 5 minutes later he's telling them, oh, the cops came and left, and like, so this is a guy who's been, you know, talking his way out of them surviving this entire movie. He's been talking them into putting themselves in situations that make their circumstances worse. And so at the end, it's like, yeah, just shoot this fucking guy. Let's get this over with. It's done. Like, we're exhausted. We're tired, you know? But
yeah, and I guess that would make sense in reality too. Just like,
which is like to the Blue Ruin point again, like one of the things that I love so much about Green Room, and one of the things that people who didn't like it as much got really frustrated with when it came out, is how stupid a lot of the actions that these characters make in this. But it's I think that makes it so much more realistic, you know, because if I was in this situation, I probably wouldn't be thinking like, oh, what would I do if I was in a movie where these neo-Nazis were trying to kill me? I would think, well, people at the end of the day, most people probably aren't going to try and kill another person. Like, we're probably all just trying to get out of this situation okay and intact and try and, like, you know, resolve this fact that like one guy killed one woman and that's a horrible thing that happened, you know? And so like, I just think that so many of these mistakes that they make in the movie are such human mistakes, and then they're facing the consequences of those mistakes. And I just find it's so exciting to watch a movie like this where the characters are not supposed to be in a movie like this, because it's a movie, you know, and they're actually behaving like real people actually would act in the situation.
Yeah, this isn't like Scream where they're going to start commenting on, we're in this situation. But it's like, you know, in short, it really is just a gig from hell. And I've been in a band. We didn't like tour extensively. Like I actually toured solo out of my own car for a little while, so that was kind of fun. But like, cool. That experience too. You're right. Like, you don't know what you're going to get into. You don't know what kind of people are running the show. You don't know what the crowd is going to be like. There's just so much uncertainties and unknown factors that could cause it to go completely wrong. And in some cases, some gigs did go wrong or for whatever reason. And it wasn't like obviously to this level, but it was still like, oh man, now this kind of got ruined for me and maybe for the audience too, and now it just doesn't feel as good. And then other times you were pleasantly surprised to play a vegan pizzeria. You know, like any little thing like that, because you have certain expectations. And even just the setup and scenario, I have certain expectations of, well, who's going to survive and how is this going to play out? And you know, but it's great to go back and just see Anton Yelchin in his prime. And you know, and also very sad. Like there's an extra on the Second Sight Blu-ray or 4K for Green Room that just came out, and there's a really great like half-hour talk with Jeremy Saulnier. And towards the end, he loses it, like he breaks down, and it's really, really hard to watch and very moving and so sad. And it's again like you just see what he brought to his roles here, especially. I mean, like even something like Thoroughbreds kind of surprised me too. So like like going back and watching him in anything now, it's similar to like watching someone like Philip Seymour Hoffman, where you kind of, there's another layer of melancholy to it when you're watching it, just because he's no longer with us. And you see not just the potential, but just like how much talent he had.
I think that's like the thing that gets me so much about Yelchin. I mean, other than just, you know, the pure human like cruelty, like the universal sort of cruelty of what happened to him, and the way that it happened is just so horrific and so horrible and such like a bullshit way to go out. It's like the thing that, or like even with Philip Seymour Hoffman, like he at least like has like such a deep bench of phenomenal performances that we can go back to. And it's like, he really was like, he went out at a time when he probably was still at the top of his game. And there was so much more that he was, you know, going to give us if he didn't go out when he did.
Right.
Anton, I feel like he was always good. I always liked him. Like Charlie Bartlett from 2008. He's really good in. Alpha Dog around the same time. He's really good in. But I feel like around this time with Green Room, with Thoroughbreds, it felt like he had finally kind of like aged and settled into like, it like I just felt like he was hitting his prime, like right when he went out. Like his performance in Green Room, I think, is one of the best performances of sort of like the last decade. Like he imbues his character with so much humanity. He has such like a vulnerability to him, such like a meekness to him that is like so delicate. And watching him kind of try to morph into this heroic figure and never really quite getting there in the movie, but still like getting a little bit better at it because he has to, and just like seeing what he tries to do to survive and how much he cares about his friends and everything. Like he just captures such an essence of this character that I think nobody else could have achieved with that. And I think that it's part of what makes this movie so special. And I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned Thoroughbreds too, because that was his last performance that, you know, came out after he passed away a few years later. And he's so funny in that. He's so skeevy in it, but also, again, just so human in it. And I think he really did. He had such a unique presence as an actor. He had such like a unique, distinct sort of gift as an actor, even when he was in something like a Fright Night, the remake with Colin Farrell and Imogen Poots as well. Like he's so fun, and that he has like, he's one of these guys. And this is a thing that I buck up against so much with like our current generation of actors that are like the age that he was when he passed away, where like a lot of them just don't feel like real people to me. They feel like people, you know, raised on Instagram and whatever. And like, they just feel like these artificial sort of beings that I don't really have any like texture to grab onto and like get the sense that these are like actual people that I'm watching. And Anton just always felt like such a genuine person on screen, and we were watching somebody like figuring it out and everything. And so it was always such a delight to see him in something. I think Green Room's his best performance, for sure. And yeah, so it really is tough. Yeah, there is a bittersweetness to watching this now with that in mind. And yeah, I watched that interview on the Second Sight 4K as well, and it really is tough to see Jeremy just like really come apart at the end of that when he starts talking about Anton. And I was reading this other interview with him too, sort of a retrospective thing, and he was talking about how which I think he does in that interview too in the Second Sight, where he was talking about how like when he made Green Room, a big part of his inspiration for it was wanting to sort of like pay tribute to his friends and that friend group that he grew up with and that were in that scene and everything. And so he wanted to like make this movie to kind of get in touch with that spirit again. And in making it, he got in touch with the spirit of these young actors, Anton and Aaliyah Shawkat and Callum Turner and Joe Cole and Imogen Poots. And like
and
they brought so much to it.
You can tell on screen too. That's exactly what he did. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And so that now this movie exists for him as this thing that, like, I think he even says, like, it got all of his stuff about his friends and everything, it all got superseded by it now being this thing that he really cherishes from just being able to have all these memories with Anton. And I just think that's so beautiful. And so it's in watching the movie, and I love, like, the Second Sight release is so good because it has so much supplemental features on there, so much great behind the scenes stuff with it, and everything in that you just feel like you're getting at least a glimpse of like who Anton was, and that's something that like just gets to be preserved. And that there's that amazing documentary. I was just looking up the name of the documentary.
God, did that make me cry?
Yeah, it's Love Antasha is the documentary that came out after he passed, where a lot of people just sort of pay tribute to him. There's a lot of like archival footage of him. There's a lot of like home videos from when he was younger. It's a watch that's gonna make you cry 100%. But it really, like, he just had so much life in him, and he just seemed like such a special dude. And you can see, like, in that documentary, like, how much like anybody who he came into contact with just loved him so much.
And you can see why. Exactly.
Yeah. 100%.
And this is just, and on top of all that, this is just a terrific thriller that is very claustrophobic and intense, and just like, I mean, at other points, I mean, it does play out like a horror movie. I mean, I don't know if it got classified that way.
Yeah, it's one of those interesting ones where it kind of like leans on that like horror/thriller divide, and like you could see like justifiably anybody like classifying it either way. It's both. Like it's got so many thrills, and it's got some shit that is going to keep you awake at night for sure.
Yeah, like instead of jump scares, like, well, I mean, I guess they are jump scares, but the shotgun blasts, like they come out of nowhere, and you're just like, you jump.
Yeah, like the scene with Anton getting fucking macheted, which we don't even see. I mean, the way that they construct that entire scene is so brilliant that we have like his arm is outside the door, and we just hear like the flesh getting hit, and we just hear his screaming, this like blood curdling scream that Anton's delivering. But we don't see anything that's happening. And then he pulls the arm in, and it is just hanging off the bone. It is like so like
it's like some Peter Jackson shit.
Exactly. Yeah. the image of that is just like so like seared into my brain for the rest of my life. Or Imogen Poots cutting open the dude with the box cutter, just cutting open his stomach. Crazy shit.
Yeah, and like there's such subtlety, like just the way she does it. You know?
Yeah, it's to the shotgun blasting. She just fucking does it, you know.
Yeah,
like they're just like, how do you know he's just, like, how do you know he's passed out? And she just cuts him open. And I remember the first time I saw that, like, it took me like 10 seconds to even process what just happened, because she just does it so abruptly, and you're like, wait, what the fuck just happened?
Wow, what a movie.
Yeah.
Really. And of course, Patrick Stewart. Come on.
Patrick Stewart. Like the against typecasting for that is so smart. The sort of like clinical nature, the sort of like casual way that he does it, but he's like operating on such a higher level than anybody else in the movie. Like he's so smart. It's just, it's really unsettling. He like never raises his voice. It's such a great performance. I also love the story too, which I think Jeremy says in that interview on the Second Sight disc as well, that like when Patrick Stewart first read the script, he like, as he was reading it, he was slowly going around his like estate and closing all of the windows, like locking all the doors, because he was just so unnerved by it.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's funny too. It's like, I remember like before this movie came out, I mean, it's just one of those things. It's the hype machine. It's very similar to what happened with Albert Brooks in Drive, like just saying, like, oh, he's going to get nominated. Oh, it's like all this is going to happen. Like it's going to change his career from this point forward. Blah blah blah. And then people were kind of saying that a little bit about Patrick Stewart. And it's not to say like, oh, they both are, you know, both Albert Brooks and Patrick Stewart are incredible in those movies for sure. But it's just kind of funny how like you mentioned, the playing against type really stands out for some people, to the point where they're just like, let's create this hype that I don't know if is necessarily justified or not. It's just kind of one of those things that happens because of the excitement level, I think.
Yeah.
Of seeing somebody like that in a villain role, perhaps.
Yeah. I think that kind of like against typecasting always like really excites people. And especially like something like that, where it's somebody who is such a known quantity and they're put in something that is much more sinister and everything, is really exciting. But all that like awards prognosticating kind of stuff I can't stand, because it just,
I know, but it's like, again, it creates expectations.
Exactly. It just like muddies the quality. Like you just want to be able to go into it and experience it without having any of this kind of like baggage to it, you know, where, because it's not like what he's doing in this is so good, but it also is like, it's not the kind of performance that's going to get awards. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like it almost is like, building up, like you said, this like expectation that you're expecting something that's going to like blow you off your feet. And it's so much more like subtle than that kind of expectation is like built for something. Like this isn't Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, that's true of, you know, some degree of Albert Brooks in Drive. It's like,
it's a lot more. Yeah, it's a lot more like he plays it close to the vest. Like he's very just like cold, methodical.
I gotta tell you, like you're mentioning the box cutter moment in Green Room. Yeah. I still think of the way Albert Brooks kills Bryan Cranston in Drive. Like it's just sort of cemented into my head.
That's brutal.
It's just like, it's so brutal, but again, so subtle. He just kind of does it. You know?
He just does it. And then he's like,
it's over.
Yeah. God. Yeah. What a scene.
Yeah, I know. That's another amazing movie, and I wish I liked that director more over time. But anyway, like now it's, you know, we're essentially, I think we're both on the same page as Green Room being the best Saulnier film. Now we have to move on to what I might consider to be his weakest film, though that's not to take anything away from it either, because it has incredible things, particularly the great Jeffrey Wright getting mostly a lead performance and a really great setup involving wolf hunting. At least that's what it seems like at the start. But I don't know, maybe it's a little too, I don't want to say ambitious, but perhaps like he added a little too much maybe. And I think I've felt this way to some extent, maybe less so about Rebel Ridge, but both his last two films I don't think need to be as long as they are. I would have liked to have seen a more tight 100-minute running time for both of them. But, like, I don't know. Once we start focusing on the Skarsgård character, or Sarsgaard, I always get them mixed up. Skarsgård's.
Skarsgård, yeah.
Yeah. Like him, and I'm not saying, like, he's bad. It's just kind of like, I just wanted this to be the Jeffrey Wright show. Mm-hmm. And it isn't that. But that's not to deny some amazing moments and strengths throughout this entire film, because it really is unsettling right from the start when we learn that a mother played by Riley Keough has lost her son, and he was taken and killed by a wolf, perhaps not. But then we sort of learn, like, again, there's a little bit of a conspiracy going on, to where this kind of reminded me a little bit of the last season of True Detective, where it was just like the cold Arctic setting, and just like this town. Of course, you know, there's an indigenous people there too, which not portrayed in the best light. You know, and like things like that sort of keep it from being on the same level as a lot of other Saulnier films. Like it's funny though, because I'm watching it, realizing it's flawed, but it's still compelling. And there is a shootout involving a machine gun and the police that really just like, that's some top level shit, man. Like, I'm watching this and going, damn, could Saulnier do like a Sicario? You know, like as like a pure adrenalized action filmmaker kind of situation. Like, that whole sequence to me is excellent. You know, like that should have been the climax, really. But
it's surprising that it's not. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned Sicario, because I was reading this interview with him maybe from around this time, or maybe it was around Green Room time, where he was like, Sicario was a specific reference that he cited as like, if he was able to scale up and make like a higher budget movie, he would love to do something like that. It is like, yeah, I'm mostly with you on Hold the Dark. I think that certainly going into it the first time when it came out as his movie post Green Room, and it being this like Arctic thriller, which is an exciting sort of landscape for me that like really draws me in to like a thriller, and especially Jeffrey Wright as the lead, who's an actor that I've always really loved, who doesn't often get to be the lead. I had an expectation for it that it didn't quite fulfill. I rewatching it, like, I know that people like Roxana, people like Isaac Feldberg are really huge fans of this. So I was excited going back to rewatch it to prepare for this, because it was the first time that I was going to see it since it came out. And I was kind of, you know, expecting to like it a lot more. I kind of felt the same way that I did the first time, where there is like such an effective like elemental quality to it. I think that there is a really like lyrical, like existential feel through those opening sections of it that
it's great. It's great at the start. It really is.
Yeah, I find it so strong for such a long stretch of time. And then as kind of the Skarsgård stuff comes more into play, I just feel like the stuff with Skarsgård and Riley Keough, it doesn't quite connect for me. Right. And so I feel like the movie almost like builds up, it builds itself up really well, and it just like can't like seal the deal as it's kind of trying to wrap together these like disparate parts at the end. But there is a lot that I really like about it. I like the idea overall of kind of observing people as like animals in a way, like it's drawing this parallel between humans and wolves that I think is actually quite effective, and how like what's in our nature and how certain things are outside of our control, and they're just part of sort of the ether of what the universe provides. And I feel like that's a nice theme that's well drawn out, I think, especially for somebody like Saulnier, who has spent so much of his career navigating in like kind of dark waters of like brutal violence. There is in this movie almost like a reckoning with why violence exists in the first place, and sometimes it is just sort of the natural order of the universe. And I think that's that's interestingly deployed here with this element too, particularly in like there's a couple scenes of Skarsgård in it's the Middle East, right?
Yeah, I think it's Iraq.
Yeah. And we see some more man-made violence there that's really upsetting. And sort of like there's never like a black and white to that, and humans are going to enact like violence, and the sort of upsetting quality of that I think it captures like all of these ideas well. It just doesn't, it's not as taut in theme as his other movies are. So it just doesn't come together for me as much as I would love it to, even though there is a lot that I like about it. I also would like, I really love James Badge Dale in this as the local cop who's kind of like in over his head with all of this that's going on. He's an actor that I've always really enjoyed, and I think that he holds a lot of weight in his body and his face in this character. Like, this is a guy who kind of has been around. He's a really sturdy hand. He like genuinely wants everybody to be all right. He's not like, ACAB and everything, obviously, but he's not a bad cop,
Right.
He's just like a genuinely a good guy trying to settle this town and settle all this tension, especially the tension between sort of the native people of this land and the white people who are now sort of, running shit with the police and everything there. And so I really like what he's doing, but again, that's just another element that's added on top of everything else. And so I think it's just a little bit too much. And especially the Skarsgård and Kehoe stuff, I just think doesn't really fulfill anything for me. It doesn't really like, especially in the last stretches, I'm just kind of like, oh, is this what the movie was like this whole time? Like, it doesn't really feel like that's what it was. And so
it's a little confusing to some degree. I don't know. It's just like, I kind of, even just once they all kind of meet up at that hot springs and stuff.
There's almost like a mystical quality to it that I feel like, to your point that you said earlier, like it's almost like leaning a little on like stereotypes in a way that I felt a little bit like at odds with. But I mean, that shootout that's like 8 minutes long is like that when you're watching that, it's like, oh, this is the dude who made Green Room, who got a bigger budget, and was able to like put more. The thing with Hold the Dark too, like Blue Ruin, Green Room, obviously Murder Party, they're very like shaggy in the way that they're made, which I think is deliberate and effective. It's not like a pejorative at all on those movies.
Right.
Hold the Dark is definitely more of like a formally astute kind of movie. And I think that shootout is a great example of that, where like it is like constructed to a T and just like navigated in this way where like it is just like you are feeling every single bullet that is coming out of that thing.
No kidding. It's like the epitome of visceral. Like you just, you get really involved in what's happening. And especially once Jeffrey Wright, like, because for most of that sequence, he's hiding, right? Like he's under a car trying to avoid all the chaos. But once he does, I'm just like, like I really freak out, like and it's just so again escalates so beautifully in a way that makes me go. I'm not saying like okay, Jeremy Saulnier, make a John Wick like movie. I'm not saying that, but it would be cool if he just did like kind of a crazy action movie. I don't know, like I mean, not necessarily. He would still ground it, and he would still have a great plot and memorable characters and all the things that he normally does. It's just kind of like that shootout kind of just stands out more than anything else in this film for me. That I kind of like latch onto it and go, I want maybe that at some point in his career, even though I don't think that's what he would want to do.
I mean, we get a little bit more of it with Rebel Ridge for sure. Like a little bit more. That is a little bit more of an action movie, but in a way that Jeremy Saulnier is going to make an action movie, I think.
I kind of wish. I mean, I'm sure. Again, there's so many factors into even just getting a movie made that there had been something between Hold the Dark and Rebel Ridge, because he deserves more work. First,
Well,
of all.
yeah, I mean, he was supposed to direct all of season 3 of True Detective, and then he
That's
only ended up
right.
doing a couple episodes because it sounds like some stuff happened behind the scenes with him and Nick Pizzolatto, some quote unquote creative differences, whatever, and so he bailed off of that. So it seems like that kind of put a stall in him for a while, and then Rebel Ridge was like a nightmare to get made because of like John Boyega was supposed to be the lead, and he dropped out like in production, I think, right? Well, I think they were already shooting, and so then they had to like scramble to recast, get Aaron Pierre, and then I know that in some interviews Saulnier talked about like once they had settled on Aaron Pierre, they still like took a year off before they kind of started back up again because they just wanted to kind of reset the table from Boyega leaving and having to kind of like pick back up with a new lead and all of that. So it's like, it's great that Rebel Ridge is finally out. I'm so glad that it finally came out. Because
no
now
kidding.
you can also move on to the next thing, but it's also really good, you know, and it's nice to see another Jeremy Saulnier movie. I wish that, Hold the Dark and Rebel Ridge, like I'm glad he's getting movies made however he can make them. It's a drag to not be able to see them in theaters unless you're in like LA for the week that they're playing there or whatever. So that's kind of a bummer that they're both on Netflix. And the fact that because they're both on Netflix, who knows if they're ever going to get a physical release, which is a bummer, but I'm glad that it's out at least. And hopefully his next one is a little bit more of a, smooth operation, getting it off the ground and put together.
Yeah, Rebel Ridge just came out, and you know, like it's always a weird time, especially during the summer, where okay, everybody has an opinion on the new Alien or the Beetlejuice sequel, and I'm just like, maybe I'll get to them eventually. Yeah, okay, I know I should probably be keeping up with all of them, but I'll get to them eventually. But when I heard there's a new Saulnier movie coming out, I'm like, yeah, that's what gets my blood pumping, right?
Yeah.
And again, like simple setup, simple premise, watch a character go through a lot of hurdles and see how they just manage and control the situation and the chaos that's happening. And Aaron Pierre, wow. Whew.
Yeah. That's
remarkable
right there.
You got it 100%. I mean, I do grow a little restless again. It's very similar to Hold the Dark, about like halfway, where it's not necessarily a subplot, but we kind of focus a little bit more on a law student, I think she is, named Summer. I mean, I know she works for the attorney's office, right? But
she's like getting her law degree,
right? And I think, and I have no qualms with her character or the actor playing, but we spend a little too much time maybe in the middle with her than I think is needed. Because again, if you make this 100 minutes tops, I think it's even stronger, but that's not to take away from its strengths whatsoever, because anytime Aaron Pierre and Don Johnson are together and sharing the screen, it pretty much like epitomizes everything I love about a Saulnier film. Like that's a showcase of his strengths when it comes to establishing character, knowing where each of them stand, and creating suspense and sustained tension. And then, of course, an inevitable burst of confrontation and violence, right? That just feels inevitable.
At least see my cousin.
You can fuck right off.
I would love to, sir, just as soon as I get my money back.
You do not stand in my station in front of my officers and set terms. You need to be very, very careful.
Let's not do that.
Chief! What are we looking at?
Oh. I think he's Marine Corps Martial Arts MCMAP. One mind, any weapon.
Whatever you decide to do, you do it damn far from here. You enter this town again, so go another route.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody as good as he is at like escalating tension in this like build up way to where like he gets you right to the point where you want to scream like somebody just fucking do something, because you need like a relief of that tension. And then something happens, and then it pulls back down. And the opening half, like there is really like there is a gear, like it's not two completely separate movies, but there is a pretty stark, I think, gear shift in the middle of this movie. And I love the first half of this movie so much. It's very much First Blood. It's very much like a neo-Western of Aaron Pierre as this guy coming, like just sort of drifting into this town and becoming embroiled in this whole scheme that's been happening, you know, for quite a long time, that he has now just like unintentionally been drawn into, and it's affecting him, and now he has to engage with it in some kind of way. And that's one of my favorite setups for Westerns. It's one of my favorite setups for like noir movies. Somebody drifting into a town.
Red Rock West.
Red Rock West is exactly one of the movies that I was thinking of with this, and something like The Man from Laramie as like a Western kind of reference for something like that. And it really is like this like tete-a-tete with him and Don Johnson, and Don Johnson is so perfectly cast as this, you know, reptilian scumbag cop who just, I mean, they mentioned him having like a shit-eating grin at one point, and it's like he looks like he's got, you know, a permanent shit-eating grin. And I just love the dialogue in all of those scenes, and that kind of like Pierre's character like constantly pushing up against, like, it is to like all the way back to Blue Ruin, like it is a guy who's like sort of like searching for the sort of restorative justice. He just wants the right thing, you know. He knows what's morally correct. He's not even trying to really cause too much of a stink. He just wants like the fair deal, and then he'll be on his way, and they will not cut him that fair deal. And so he just like keeps pushing up against it. And, you know, he's worried about it's his cousin, right? That he's trying to get the bail posted for. And so he's got a sincere personal cause in this that he's trying to get resolved too. He's very worried his cousin had ratted on somebody before. He's being transferred to another prison. He's going to be in Gen Pop if he's in another prison. Basically, if this transfer happens before he's able to post bail, his cousin's going to get killed in prison. And so he's like really concerned about this, obviously. And so he also has like, there's like this ticking time like element to it that I think increases the tension. And yeah, I just love all the detail in those scenes, that dynamic between Aaron Pierre and Don Johnson. And Saulnier just like fills these moments with so much richness and finding details. We see how like the cops discover that Pierre's character served in the Marines, and like that becomes a whole other element. But then they realize that he never deployed. He was just like an instructor at the specific sort of combat training. And so then they have like this kind of condescending attitude towards him because he never deployed. And that's a really interesting element to it, that like I grew up in a military family, and that's something that I've never really seen depicted in movies, like the sort of disparity between how people see people who deployed versus people who didn't. And that creates a whole other element that's really exciting and interesting and adds another layer. And then there's the greatest line delivery of the year.
I know exactly where you're going.
When Don Johnson and Aaron Pierre are outside of the station, they're going back and forth. The tension is really rising between them as the other cops are inside of the station trying to look up the details of who Pierre's and
their Wi-Fi had been down for a while.
Their Wi-Fi had been down, so it's that great kind of movie thing where they're only getting information in pieces, and they're only getting it at this exact moment, and they're trying to look up what the specific kind of combat training he's done is, which is MICMAP training. And they're looking it up because they've never heard of this. And the line it happens when the one cop is looking it up, and she gets to the Wikipedia page and she goes, "Oh, he's on the Wikipedia page." And like, that is like, that's such a great Saulnier kind of thing where it's like, it's 5 words, and it tells us everything we need to know about what they just learned and what the fuck is about to happen next.
Exactly.
Because like it puts into context for the audience, like we in 2024, we know what the fuck it means when somebody is on the Wikipedia page for something. And so we know in that moment, this guy is like shit's about to get real. And it does. Like she says that, and Emery Cohen plays one of the other cops, and he immediately pulls out his gun and is like, we got to get out there now. Like, we got to like get out there now. Like, shit's about to get down. It's such an exciting moment. And it's such a great example of Saulnier's gift for like economy and dialogue, and like how much he holds back on exposition and holds back on details until we need them, you know. I just love, like, I watched this for the second time the other night, and like that scene, I mean, on the first time I watched it, that scene stood out to me. On the second time I watched it, it like even more so. Like that's such like a pin drop kind of moment. I
know. That's like when was it David Ehrlich does his like best scenes kind of like montage at the end of the year. Yeah. Like that's such a good scene. Like, and even just the dialogue, at times, like especially for that confrontation, it was like reaching Mamet like levels.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really good comparison. Mamet, I think is really, that's dead on. And yeah, so like I love all of that shit. I love all of the neo-Western stuff at the beginning, in that first section. But then, in the second section, it becomes more, to Saulnier's point about it being First Blood meets Michael Clayton. He goes more into this like conspiracy thriller kind of thing with like a lot of paperwork, or whatever. And I love Michael Clayton's one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't think that what he's doing in the second section of the movie really like captures the essence of it. I think it's just a little bit, again, to the point of Hold the Dark, there's a little bit too much going on. There's a whole thing with like there's a whole scene with James Cromwell where they like go to his house where like I didn't even fully understand like 100% what was happening there. There's like too much detail. There's becomes too much exposition, which Saulnier is so good at, like withholding exposition, and it just becomes too much. That all of this stuff revolves around the idea of civil asset forfeiture, which I think is a really like smart thing, and I think a really important thing to kind of draw attention to, because it's this really fucking horrible, like it's illegal, but it feels like a loophole that is being like exploited to keep like people, to keep pushing people down and keep them sort of like in the like prison industrial system, and in a way to line cops' pockets and line the pockets of police departments. And I think that Rebel Ridge does a really good job of sort of educating about what that is and what's going on. But it also is like, it's such a complicated thing that is happening that it becomes hard to sort of like deploy all of that information in a movie while also still making like an exciting sort of cinematic like journey, especially for somebody who like Saulnier, who is so gifted at building details out of sort of like these more like simple setups and creating these like taut sort of like contained things. And so, for me, it does. There are things that I like about the second section of the movie, but that is kind of where it trails off a bit for me, is when it gets more into that water.
I think he got a little like ambitious to a fault because something like, you know, Sidney Lumet doing Prince of the City. There's a reason why that's 3 hours long.
Yeah.
there's a lot to cover when it comes to, you know, police corruption, the justice system, all these factors and all these people, it's really challenging to just suddenly veer more towards that territory when you pretty much like established a really good sort of Rambo First Blood kind of scenario, and you kind of want that angle to keep going, and then suddenly it's like, well, let's just take a little break and do something else that is very Michael Clayton-esque. And again, I love Michael Clayton too, but maybe much like Hold the Dark, probably didn't need as much as we get here with all that stuff. And I'm, again, I admire him. Again, it's like, it's a big swing in a way for him. Like, cause he could have just been the guy who does things like Blue Room and Green Room. But again, I'm sure he wants to evolve as a storyteller and try to branch out and do something with a little more depth. And it's there. It's definitely there. It's just kind of like shoehorned in and not really fully realized in a way that sort of like gets you emotionally by the end, which is what I was hoping for. But I mean, still, it's great climax. So there's a great final shootout confrontation with the cops. That is great. And, you sort of like get a good cop versus bad cop sort of scenario playing out there very well. But
and I love too that like one of the things that I love even through like all of it, that Aaron Pierre's character is all about de-escalation. Like the entire movie, like Saulnier makes such a point of drawing out that he like, this is a guy who's using non-lethal force the entire time. He's not killing anybody. Right. And like, I think that's a cool thing in the movie. Like we don't really see that. And like, it's a guy who like, one, that's just like not what he's about. Like it matters to him to not take lives. He like wants to resolve the situation, and he's like an absolute badass who can't, like, he could murder all these motherfuckers if he wanted to. But he like intentionally does not want to do that. And I think that's just a cool thing to add into the mix. But, and at the same time, he also understands like legally, like, if he kills a cop, he's in so much worse shit than he's already in. And so like, I think that's an interesting element too. And that's like never even explicitly stated in the movie. But I think that it's the kind of thing where like Saulnier is like thinking about this kind of stuff in a way that other people probably wouldn't. Like most people making this movie, Aaron Pierre's character would just be killing all these people. I mean, First Blood, he kills a lot of people in that movie, you know? And so like, I think that, that's like to Saulnier's credit, that even through all these moments, he's still putting a lot more thought into all of these details of his work than most people would be.
Yeah, he's not doing like that Bob Odenkirk movie, right? Nobody. Yeah. He's not doing that necessarily. Yeah. I mean, like I was thinking too, really quickly, like there was a couple of recent movies that almost feel like Saulnier adjacent or influenced. The Standoff at Sparrow Creek is one of them. Mm-hmm. And the most recently that came out this year that I really liked, The Last Stop at Yuma County. Did you see that?
Oh yeah, the Jim Cummings movie.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, that's more Coen's.
That's very Coen's. Yeah,
because it definitely has like some.
It has a little bit more of that. Yeah, exactly. That sort of like dark humor to it. A little bit. It's a little bit more pronounced.
Right, exactly. But like those are, I
also is like in a contained environment. You know, a lot of characters kind of coming together. Jocelyn Donahue's in that, who I really from The House of the Devil, the Ty West movie from like 2009.
She's good.
I really like her. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think what it comes down to is like movies about miscommunication and abuse of power, and just like how it all comes down to like certain nuances or certain details within the justice system, and obviously a very corrupt justice system involving the police. But like all that is always fascinating, and at the same time, this is just a damn cool movie at times, right? Like it's just great to watch Aaron Pierre do what he does, and I want more action thrillers like this in general.
Yeah, Aaron Pierre, this is like such like a. I mean, if people haven't seen Underground Railroad, the Barry Jenkins Amazon series. He's phenomenal in that. So like that sort of to me was like his like breakout. But I think this more than anything else on a more public sphere is gonna be like, this is like his calling card. This is such like a star making performance for him, and I'm stoked to see where his career is gonna go from here. Because that's a guy who. That guy has fucking charisma. That guy has screen presence,
100%, and you totally like, you just feel him. You feel his look, right?
Yeah.
When he's staring down Don Johnson, I'm just like, oof. That's a movie star face.
Like, you need somebody who has that kind of presence to know that he can like strike the fear of God into like somebody like Don Johnson who does have like such like a cocksure sort of attitude to him. So like he has to like have this element where it's like he can strike fear into him, but also, Don Johnson is still gonna think that he's the top dog. You know what I mean? Like it's totally. Such like an interesting kind of needle to thread there, and Pierre just does it tremendously.
Couldn't agree more. Wow. I just love that we went through all these movies and had interesting things to say about all of them, because there's a lot, like a lot of me, going in early on was just like, oh, he's just a cool director, right? Like, he just makes cool movies. But no, there's layers. There's really interesting things to bring up, and I'm grateful that you came on to do so. But what are your top 3 Saulnier films?
Oh yeah. So I mean, my top. Number 1, obviously Green Room. Number 2, for sure, Blue Ruin. And then 3 for me it's really like kind of neck and neck between Hold the Dark and Rebel Ridge. I think I probably would go Rebel Ridge at 3, and then Hold the Dark, and then Murder Party.
That's exactly what I was going to say, so I don't need to say it.
We did it.
Woo! Yay! This was so much fun. Where can people follow you and your work? I'm assuming Letterboxd is a great place to start.
Yeah. So you can follow me on Letterboxd. My username there is Mitchell. My work, so I'm the managing editor over there. So I run our editorial, which is called Journal, on Letterboxd. You can on the app or the website, you can hit the tab. I think on the app, the tab says news, and on the website, the tab says journal. You can click over there to get all of our kind of stories we're writing, features on old and new movies, interviews with filmmakers, everything like that. I periodically write for Pace Magazine. I recently did a really long interview with James LeGros for the AV Club. If people wanted to check that out,
love James LeGros.
Really cool. Yeah, that was really exciting to do. And yeah, I mean that's basically. I mean, you can follow me on Twitter at @itismitchell for whatever qualities Twitter has these days. I still try to use it to post my stuff. So
understandable. Yeah, that's the thing. Is like. I've even heard like on a couple other podcasts how like, these days Twitter I just use for DMs. And I'm like, I kind of get that.
Yeah, I use it for, I still rely on it for DMs. And it still is like the only social media that I've like found like effectiveness in like kind of like marketing myself or whatever. Like, sharing stuff that I've worked on. So I still try to use it for that. Although I'm not, to what we were saying earlier, I don't engage too much with the discourse or the complete lack of usability of that app anymore.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I still encourage people to go to Blue Sky, like that's the thing now is like, I know a lot of people have gravitated over, towards using that one, and I try to as well, but it's just like, man, there's just too much stuff to keep up with.
Yeah, exactly. It's too much.
There's Threads and Instagram and Facebook, like all this stuff is just.
Yeah, I just can't do it. I have a Blue Sky. I tried it for like a month when like it looked like Twitter was like gonna be like removed from the face of the earth or whatever last year, and I just like I couldn't keep up with it at all.
Yeah, no, it's hard. I that's the one thing that sometimes keeps me out of things. I'm just like, I just want to shut down, like, and not to say like, oh, I want to shut down from movies or talking about them or writing about them. It's just
gonna be looking at your phone all the time on all the different social medias and whatever.
Yeah, it's like you get that little dopamine burst of your phone lighting up, and even now I'm sort of like resenting it. Like I look at my phone, I'm like, don't light up right anymore. I need time to get away from that. So, no, but thanks again for being here. I mean, I really appreciate it. Like, and I also want to say to everybody listening, thank you for your patience, because normally you don't have to wait like 6 weeks for a new episode, but there was just a long gap between the Keith Gordon episode and this one because of a lot of stuff happening with the day job and, just like me trying to focus more on my health and all this stuff. And, it's nothing scary. It's just life, life gets in the way sometimes. But this is definitely going to continue to be a monthly show. And next month for October, for spooky season, I am welcoming back librarian and friend Chloe Waryan, who joined me last year for James Wan. She'll be happily returning to talk about Guillermo Del Toro.
Nice.
Again, like we won't cover every title at length, but this is just a fascinating filmography from a director that I'd say I run hot and cold with for the most part. Like there are things I'm very passionate about, certainly, but there are other things I'm like, mostly shrug off, but I'm excited to binge on his work next. In the meantime, visit directorsclubpodcast.com. Follow my Substack at 5years.substack.com. Of course, Letterboxd, all that good stuff is linked in the show notes. And thanks again to my wonderful guest, Mitchell, who I feel very grateful to know and follow, and everyone else should too. Thanks so much
for having me.
Awesome, man. Take care. Very good. We did it. Yes.
Done.
That was awesome.
Yeah, that was a blast.
Director Jeremy Saulnier, it's all about letting his characters be imperfectly human in the moment, even when danger approaches, allowing the audience to constantly feel on edge. But it's also about the moments we're not used to seeing in a genre picture.
The films I make are often could be described as the cutting room floor of an action movie. How do we get from A to B to C, every little step I want to see it. I don't want to cut just to let's get to the plot. My plot is in detail.
Hi there, Jeremy. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Excellent. It's a pleasure to talk with you. I really like the 3 films of yours that I've seen. You definitely continue to evolve.
Thank you.
There's a true sense of precision and confidence that goes into your films, whether if it's the fast-moving chaos and Murder Party, the minutia of revenge and Blue Ruin, and for Green Room, you focus so intensely on the visceral response of being in the moment where anything unexpected could happen, which kind of fits the punk rock aesthetic in a way. So talk about what inspired you to tell this particular story.
Yeah, I've always loved the punk rock hardcore scene. I was part of it in the 1990s. I don't have a lot of archives of it, though. It was pre-internet, and it was so experiential. You had to show up. You had to be there. But also, I just enamored with the energy and the visual opportunities. So while I was in the hardcore scene in the 90s, I was sort of becoming a filmmaker, too. The same crews that I was in bands with, I was making films with on the side. So I always had this association with music and movies. And then after Blue Ruin, I had a certain amount of success that I never expected. And I thought it'd be fun to not do the logical thing and step up and do a big studio ensemble movie or something way out of my depth. I figured I had this idea that's been floating around my head for almost 10 years, and it was a punk rock band in the holding area, the green room of a concert venue, while a live show was taking place. So that the energy there, the potential was huge. And then I had really good foreknowledge of the hardcore scene, which I hadn't seen really portrayed properly on any films to date. I'm sure there's a few exceptions. I haven't seen every film, but I just plunged into it, and I did something that I thought would be more of an homage to my upbringing cinematically and musically. And once I had this sort of premise, it was both very familiar to me. The plot itself was totally uncharted. So I had this great sort of crossroads where I could finally realize a film that I've been trying to get made for almost a decade, and then it'd also be totally a brand new experience when I was writing it. So I could surprise myself. I could go off the map and kind of be uninhibited and unfiltered to make a film that I thought would be true to the characters and hyper intense, because I did not adhere to formula, or I didn't intend to adhere to formula, or I wouldn't let it guide me. Right. And I was able to kind of just use this insanely visually rich, aggressive musical scene and mine it for all that energy, and then kind of shed that eventually and just stick to a very intense, rather accessible siege thriller scenario. So it's really fun to kind of blend all these worlds.
It's a real success. I mean, as much as Blue Ruin was your take on a revenge film, this was more of a survival story meets war film. The environment was such a strong component in a way that kind of recalls my favorite horror film, John Carpenter's The Thing. You know, you have all these obstacles to overcome, like adding dogs or including the use of feedback. So there's something about your attention to detail that feels really grounded in reality rather than tacked on, which is true when it comes to the sudden violence that takes place in Green Room. What is your process in trying to envision how someone is going to meet their demise and how it gets executed in the film? Like, what is your philosophy surrounding portraying violence?
Well, in general, like, as far as deciding who goes and when, that's the fun part because I don't plan that. I mean, I have a general arc of the film. I do know where it has to end up thematically and somewhat plot-wise, but I let them make mistakes. I inhabit their characters, and I really try and be logical. But when there really aren't solutions for them, I'm not going to have some sort of narrative convenience come in and save the day. I'm going to let someone die if they make the wrong choice and end up between, a couple of bad situations, and one involves a pit bull and one involves a skinhead with a machete. You know, it's a lose-lose. But I do think you touched on that earlier. Like, I mine, even though this is a fictional environment, I mine it for opportunity. I really dig in and I see, well, what is there? How do I utilize the space? We are in a concert venue, so there is all kinds of amplifiers and microphones and dark hallways and kitchens and bars. Like, so I just started to think, just physically, what do I have? What do these characters have? And it's really fun to challenge myself and not make it easy. But when I find great solutions within this fictional environment, I go all in and really utilize it. So then that's the fun is I am a fiend for details, and I find things I think some other writers might not find because I'm not really looking to satisfy the screenplay. I'm looking within this fictionalized world that I visualize. So when I write, I actually see the movie unfold as I type. So it really helps me get my bearings and to dig into things that, others might overlook. And as far as the violence itself, I just have to have a really strong emotional character component to it. It has to be high impact, and you just feel that loss. And then I balance it out because I love, you mentioned John Carpenter's Thing. That's a huge influence on me as far as creating tension in an enclosed environment and having a phenomenal makeup show. That movie is just on the strictly arts and crafts level, just phenomenal.
Right.
Rob Bottin's work there. So I feel once in a while I'll say, let's have a gratuitous close-up of this amazing makeup effect. But usually that's a non-fatal occurrence. When there is a loss of life in film, I treat it with a certain amount of reverence. I think that is what makes the film so tense. Is you don't really know how to feel at times. You know that you feel a real risk, and very high stakes sensation when anyone who dies. It's a shock, and it takes a big emotional toll.
Since I know our time is limited, I just want to say that I love the film, and as a huge fan of 80s cinema, you really managed to capture the kind of film I used to rent with my friends. So, there should definitely be a VHS version of Green Room. I think so. I think you stepped up your game big time here. The shock and awe with the great payoffs is really, really spectacular, and the whole audience felt it too.
Definitely the goal here is to create that experience where it is truly terrifying, but it's also thrilling. It's also exhilarating, and it's just this pressure cooker that should be enjoyed, hopefully collectively by an audience. But where I'm trying to sort of reinvigorate the cinema as I knew it from the '80s. So it's sort of like John Carpenter style, like just badass siege movie with a synthetic score, without being too self-aware. I'm trying to make this a pure vision whenever I can, but there's no doubt that I'm influenced by all the films I've ever seen, and for certain, the master, John Carpenter.
And as a final question, because you're going to get this a lot, but what is your desert island band?
It is Black Sabbath.
Good choice, sir. Good choice. Well, Jeremy, it was great talking with you, man. This is a real pleasure, and I wish you all the success in the world with the film and upcoming projects. I can't wait to see it. I can't wait to follow your career as time goes on.
Me too. We'll see what happens.
I left alone. My mind was blank. I needed time to think, to get the memories from my mind. What did I see? Can I believe that what I saw that night was real and not just fantasy? Just what I saw in my old dreams.